Good afternoon. We will call to order the September 1, 2020 meeting of the Board of Elections, and we'll rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, good afternoon. I know the agenda was published. It's being distributed in the rear of the room, so everyone should have a copy. Is there any discussion on the agenda items?
Mr. Chairman, there are just a couple of notes. First off, she's not here today, but I would like to wish a warm and happy birthday to one of our fine staff members, one of the best election workers, in my opinion, in the United States, Amanda Wallace. So, everybody here, say happy birthday, Amanda. Happy birthday. Thank you. Secondly, late last week at 4 p.m. on Friday, we received a one-sentence resignation letter from one of the board members, and I just thought that was important to note at the beginning of this meeting that currently these are the two board members that we have. We have notified the county solicitor so that they can contact the Republican Party. Mr. Byrne resigned, and so it'll be up to the parties to submit 3 names to the county council to consider for replacing him on the Board of Elections.
Very good. That's what it's my understanding of how the charter would handle that. So, the first item we have on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of June 7th, and Ms. Lunkheimer and I were distributed a couple of days ago. Any thoughts, corrections, changes?
No.
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Mr. Allen, your report, sir.
So we've got a number of items to go through. As of this meeting, the county council will consider tonight the approval of the ballot printing contract for the November 2 municipal election. We've got more detailed specifications this time around that provided schedules and deliverables, and this is going to be, for the first time since we've gone to this new voting system, a 2-ballot election. And this is the result not because we couldn't fit it on one page, but because the Pennsylvania Constitution requires that judicial retention questions be listed on a nonpartisan separate page. So that means every single voter, whether they're a vote-by-mail voter or in person in precinct on election day, or even a provisional voter, will receive a card A and a card B. To facilitate this and make this go as smoothly as possible with our polling places, the ballots are going to arrive collated, so in packs of 50 ballots that will contain 100 sheets. Card A, card B, card A, card B, card A, card B. So we want to minimize the prospect of having been in 2-ballot elections before. You want to minimize the prospect of a judge only retrieving, or a poll worker only retrieving a pack of ballot A and not retrieving ballot B, and then 10 voters vote before anybody realizes, oh, there was a card B as well. So we tightened up the specifications. We're going to have 2 times as many ballots in terms of quantity for 2 times as many voters. And then with 2 sheets, we're going to have roughly 4 times as many ballots. And I'm pleased to report that even with these higher quantities, by tightening up the specifications and working on a lot more detail in them, we received 3 of the 5 offers, proposals, I should say, were for less than what we spent in the May primary. So, though we'd like to have the board vote to approve the acceptance of the bid that the county council is going to be accepting tonight from Election IQ in the amount of, I had it here, I believe it's in your packet,
I have it if you'd like.
if you
Is
could,
it-
please.
$125,854.80.
And I'd be more than willing to answer any questions that you have.
Ashley?
Mr. Allen, no, I appreciate a lot of this, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands some of the concerns that were last time. One of which was very simple, and I just want to ask you about the perforation. It seemed to cause a lot of heartache at the polls, I understand, from our poll workers. Can you comment on how the ballots, it sounds like they're not going to be in the way they're packaged, but I would appreciate if you could clarify that.
Yes, the perforations were something that were baked in the cake before I arrived here in the beginning of April. They have been used in other jurisdictions, and so after, that was the first time, though, I had ever seen them used. I certainly was not here for the preparation of the specifications. Having seen what we did see, staff was unanimous in let's not use the tabs again. So these will not be on perforated tabs. And I mentioned that at the June 7 meeting that
We weren't
was,
going to do it, yeah.
that we weren't going to do that. I'd never seen it before, and I hope to never see it again.
Okay. And then also, I think just to, again, this is an issue we've also discussed at that other meeting, but just to talk about it in the public forum in this meeting, because we're making a decision on the cost and the printer. There were some issues, as you know, around ballot shortages, and even though if you could just remind the public about that and just help emphasize why you decided it would be appropriate to recommend a doubling of the quantity, I'd appreciate it.
Again, staff followed the law, and the problem isn't what the staff did, it's the problem is the law. There's a bad law that was written as Pennsylvania was moving toward paper ballot systems across the state. It essentially says, look at the previous 3 comparable elections. So in May's case, the 2015, 2017, and 2019 May primaries, look at the turnouts, and then pick the highest one, and then add 10%. Well, that totally fails to cover what happened in a handful of precincts where the turnouts went from 18% to 36 to 40%. So adding 10%, the staff added 20% and then rounded up to the next 50. But in these precincts where the turnout previous high was 81 and it was now 171 on May 18th, there was no way to cover for that. So I would hope that there's bipartisan agreement that law needs to be rewritten. I think there's general agreement among many jurisdictions that for our purposes, the law will be ignored. So we're not looking at 10% increase. We're looking at we're trying to have build up for a supersized turnout. In my past experience, we just ordered for 100% turnout. You hope you send out the invitations, you hope everybody shows up to the party, but if they don't, you have enough, ballots to go around. And so we will have for Election Day, I want to say, we had approximately 120,000 ordered, maybe slightly more. For the May election, we're going to be closer to 320,000 for this election, even though the turnouts are expected to be comparable. So we should be in good shape, and that doesn't include provisional vote and vote by mail ballots. So we should be in good shape.
Well, I appreciate that you were able to accomplish all of that and then also do it at a less cost than the May election, and the recommendation of purchasing and yourself as well, that the quality, you believe Election IQ will be a good partner with the county, I assume, based on what you've
The
reviewed.
vendor does have experience in 2 ballot elections, I should note, and is closer than the lowest bidder who had experience, but a bad experience with a 2 ballot election this past May in another Pennsylvania jurisdiction, and that is why we selected Election IQ.
Thank you. I
So
have
they're
no
in
further
they're in
questions.
Akron, Ohio, so they're a little closer than the previous vendor, which was in Michigan.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions, Chairman.
Mr. Allen, first of all, I very much appreciate the incredible amount of work you've done to define the specifications for the RFP to enable us to to get the best price. And secondly, I acknowledge that we are still learning these new machines, and this will be our first two-ballot election. And that's what the law requires, and we're gonna follow the law. Secondly, we learned our lesson about the perforated papers. We thought last time around that having them in a tablet, they would be presented more neatly and wouldn't be misplaced, et cetera. But we learned that is difficult to work with, and they don't scan as well. So we are constantly trying to improve and have the best and most efficient election for the voters and also for the poll workers. So I commend you for all of that. I think you've answered our questions here today, that you've tried to identify the best possible printer at the best possible price, and I am satisfied that we're going to move forward in the best manner that we can. As far as ordering the ballots, again, we've discussed it pretty extensively at our last meeting. And while in a perfect world you'd buy 100% ballot for 100% registered voters, we kind of know that's going to result in a ton of paper being thrown away. So we're going to try this, ordering double the prior turnout, and we feel that we're creating a very comfortable margin. There may still be some issues in particular places, and we're going to have procedures in place to be more efficient in getting ballots out than we were in the past. Again, we learn from each election, we get a little bit better. So hopefully we will not have the issues this time that we've had before, and at the same time not spend an exorbitant amount of money to overprint ballots that will be by and large thrown away. So I'm very satisfied with your proposal. And Ms. Von Hammer, do you want to make a motion?
I would move to accept the recommendation of Mr. Allen.
I'll second it. Call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No, none opposed. So we can move to the next item, Mr. Allen.
The next item is merely just a review of several of the items that I mentioned in the first item relative to how there will be two ballots.
Right.
So in addition to having the collated stacks of ballots provided to the precincts, we're also going to try to develop signage, we're going to develop signage that reminds voters that they have two ballots to cast, two ballots to vote, and that they should feed them one at a time into the scanner. So we're going to include that in our training manual, as well as all of our in-person training, so that the machine operators, the people positioned next to the ballot scanner, are there to caution the voter not to try to feed both ballots in at the same time. We think it'll be fairly intuitive, but just in case it's not, we want to make sure that there's signage to remind voters, and then a human being at each scanner. Also new this election on the ballot design, this will be the first time that we'll have a municipal election on paper ballots. It's not the first time anywhere in Pennsylvania, but there's a newer law so that cross-filed candidates who won both the Democratic and Republican primary. In the past, on the old Danaher equipment, we had two columns, one Democratic, one Republican, and let's say Joanne Jones won both the Democratic and Republican primaries for a certain office, her name would appear twice. Well, on a paper ballot, if they were to do that, and this is a state law, not something that we're creating, the state law, the newer state law says if a person wins, they're listed once with both party affiliations. And if you think about it, that prevents overvotes on a paper ballot, because if I was a big supporter of Joanne Jones, I might mark both the boxes next to each of her listings of her name. So it also prevents undervotes in vote for 4 offices, so that somebody doesn't vote for Joanne Jones twice and think they can only make 4 selections, or they vote for Joanne Jones and they make 3 other selections, but that the scanner reads that as they picked 5 persons. So this is a new part of the election, of a municipal election. It's not new for other jurisdictions who have had municipal elections who've had to tackle this, and we think that the legislature recognized the potential for overvotes and undervotes, and this is why they changed the law. So we hope to have sample ballots out in the coming weeks, but at a minimum, we hope to have by Tuesday posted to our website the full candidate list with their lever numbers. So the ballots will appear, speaking of the lever numbers, as the voter is viewing a column of candidates for, let's say, a school directors for a school district. They'll first see the lever number, then the candidate's name, and then Dem or Dem Rep or Rep, depending on which primary or primaries that candidate won. The reason they're Dem Rep, and Rep, or Dem Rep, Dem, depending on who finished first in the Democratic primary, is based, so it would switch if and when we have a Republican governor, it would go Rep, Rep Dem, and then Dem, or Rep Dem, Rep, and Dem.
The same way that the party that holds the government used to be column A and the party that didn't was column B. Now, because they're sequential, same principle, they're ordering based on who holds the
Exactly.
the state
And then
house.
third parties are listed where there are third-party candidates, such as Green or Constitutional or whatever. Those are listed after the Dems, Dem Reps, and Reps. We looked at the possibility of trying to shorten it so that for Dem Rep, it would just be D/R. I didn't like the optics of that. I think that if you won both primaries, you should have both of those big designations. That created an issue then with candidates with longer names, but we determined that in those instances where the name started, let's say it was a really long name or they had 3 names, we wouldn't have Dem in that column and wrap around Rep. We would move both below that, and that made it clearer that this person won both primaries. So those are some of the significant changes that are coming as a result of the state law and the move to the paper-based system. We had an opportunity this past week to meet with party leaders from both major parties. Mr. Manley Parks was on the call as well. We gave them sample ballots to look at to see what our rationale was for how we were going to display different items. We answered all the questions that they had, and I did not get the sense that there were any major issues with how we were, A, interpreting the law, and B, designing the ballot. So we're going to continue to have outreach. We need to reach out to, because of the judicial retention, separate ballot, we want to have outreach to the bar associations as well. Mr. Parks, I don't know if you want to address that?
Sure, briefly. Just the proposal came during this meeting with the party leaders to discuss the ballots, that perhaps we reach out to the Delaware County Bar Association because they do some publicity for the judicial retention race that's nonpartisan. I thought that was a good idea, and so we'll be reaching out to Bill Baldwin about that, who's the executive director of the Delaware County Bar Association, to just sort of make sure they're aware of the fact that there's a second ballot at this time around, that that's new, and that the word gets out through that channel as well.
So with that, I included in the packet for the board members examples of the different ballots and the logic behind how we were laying things out. John Barton has been doing a really good job of experimenting with different items. We're also going to have printed on the bottom of the ballot, if it's a vote by mail ballot, be sure to place both card A and card B in your secrecy envelope. And then for in-person voting, and to make sure that you place both card A and card B, or one at a time, in the scanner. So if there are any questions, be more than happy.
No,
Okay.
we've obviously had conversations as this process has taken place, and again, we're very satisfied with things. So next, we have an action item for the postage on the ballot return envelopes. You're going to present that, Mr. Arnold?
Yes, at the September 14, September 15 County Council meeting, I would like to be able to recommend, with the Board of Elections concurrence, that the county again pay for return postage on vote-by-mail return envelopes the ones that are returned by mail, as has been the practice in the past 2 elections. I would ask that the board move to recommend that Delaware County again pay for return postage. We don't know what's going to happen with this Delta variant of the pandemic. Here we thought we were out of the woods about a month ago, and now we're seeing more severe cases among children. I hate to say it. I don't know if there's going to be more demand for vote by mail, but at the same time, I would hope that we could work to not disenfranchise anyone simply because they failed to buy a stamp.
Do you want to make a motion, Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've expressed at other meetings, at least I know I've expressed strong feelings in support of this for many reasons, not just Delta variant, but I think if the law is intended to encourage voter access to the polls, to not include the postage could be discouraging, and I would not support that. So if there's no conversation, then I would like to move to adopt the proposal that Mr. Allen make the recommendation to County Council to pay postage for ballot return envelopes.
So I'll second it, and then before we have discussion, I guess there may be some public comment on this. Does any member of the public want to speak to this issue? Okay.
I would-
Well, I think
I would
Ms.
like to
Guiney.
add one last thing, and that is that, for all the ballot return envelopes that are returned in our drop boxes, we don't get hit for that postage at all. So it's not like we're buying stamps and putting them on the envelopes. These are business reply mail, so it's based on how many come through the Postal Service, not, it's not like buying postage.
Sounds like that was, Ms. Guiney, is that what you intended to talk about? Okay.
All right. Is there anybody who has comment? Okay. So with that, I'm also in support of this, that we've discussed this a couple of times at previous meetings, and my feelings on the record are clear that I feel this encourages participation in the system, and that's one of our key and central and important considerations in everything we do. So I'm going to be in favor of it as well. So, do you have anything else, Ms.
I have
Lawson?
no other comment. Thank you,
All right,
Mr.
so
Chair.
I'll call the question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that also passes. The voter service centers.
So
Pre-election mail.
I think the pre-election mailing is next, item D.
Oh, you know what? I
That's all right.
read my agenda too quickly. I kind of thought that was the item we just handed, but go ahead, sir.
In recent talks with the county executive, we explored the possibility of the Delta variant causing various problems, perhaps needing to remind people that they need to verify that their polling place has not changed, and to try to inform them if they're going to be voting in person on Election Day, to try to tell them this is your polling place, but also be sure to check before Election Day to make sure it hasn't changed, because we quite honestly don't know what we're going to be getting into in the next couple of months, and we need to be prepared. The second point of having a pre-election mailing would be to not send out an invitation, or rather an application, but instead to give voters a link to the website where they could apply online in case they need to know, that, or in case they haven't applied and they might want to consider applying. So it's basically you've got 2 options, but if you want to apply online, you've got to do so by early October. And if you're going to vote in person, great, be sure to use this website or call this phone number to double check your polling place. So I would asking for a motion to endorse this request for the pre-election mailing, and be happy to answer any questions you have.
And to clarify, by apply, you mean apply to vote by mail?
Yes, apply to vote by mail. So we would not be sending out applications in this mailing. This would be a postcard mailing, and we would try to minimize the costs by making it a household mailing, so that if 2 voters have the same last name at the same exact address and unit number, we would only send one to the Smith household or the Jones household, for example.
And it would be for all registered active voters?
All registered active voters who have not already applied to vote by mail.
Oh, very good.
Just, Mr. Allen, a couple questions. One, I mean, well, first of all, I want to say, I do think there have been a number, today alone, we have numerous polling place change suggestions that are going to be up for vote. So I'm very overall supportive of this. I just wonder, and the goal of not over-communicating so that it doesn't become complex, because there's two very simple messages you propose should be included. Is there any consideration of whether we should also put a warning that whether you vote by mail or in person, there's going to be a 2-page ballot?
We can incorporate the element from the signage. I'd have to look into that. I don't want to make a postcard too busy, but we can incorporate that, it's a human shape, basically holding a different ballot in each hand. We might be able to incorporate that, so I'll try to incorporate that.
And I think if you want to look at it, I don't have to have the vote contingent on that, but I would ask that the vote include the possibility that that be included, because I just think that worries me greatly, that there will be voter confusion even by some of the poll workers, although we're going to talk about poll workers soon and trying to incentivize increased training. So that would be my suggestion, but I'm otherwise supportive of those reminders.
All right.
So when we make the motion that we make a recommendation that ultimately council has to approve this, yes? So, we make a recommendation to council
That's
that we're supportive of this initiative and give Mr. Allen the discretion to design the mailing consistent with our comments here today.
Yes, so moved.
Second. Is there any public comment on this? Okay. Any more discussion?
No.
All right. Call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. All right, Mr. Allen.
Next, in terms of voter service centers, we are examining opening voter service centers in Upper Darby and Chester City Hall, just as we did ahead of the November 2020 election. New this year, we are working with the Township Building in Upper Darby, as opposed to the fourth floor of a public building that we used last November, which was not very popular with voters in terms of having to use the elevator or go up the stairs. So we've been in contact with Upper Darby Township. They have a ground floor entrance that's not far. It's a ground floor entrance. It's accessible, and we'd like to be able to use that. And we're also going to pursue having the availability of a voter service center at Chester City Hall. This is not a voting location as much as it is a place where voters may apply for or drop off, like a drop box, their vote by mail ballot. So they also can mark it there and put it in the envelope, but it's not exactly like, an early voting site or anything like that.
Will these facilities have the capabilities to print the absentee ballots?
Yes, they would. We would have connections to the state SURE system established at each location, and we would also have the ability, we would have a touch writer there so that we could print ballots. We also have one in media.
Right.
The third most important one here in the Bureau of Elections on the ground floor. So we would have these three set up for this fall.
All right. Let me make a motion.
Yes, I just wanted to ask one quick question, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, we don't have the numbers in front of us. We reviewed it at an earlier meeting, but I believe your recommendation is based on, in fact, voter use of these service centers and having them having successfully facilitated voting access in the last election. Is that correct understanding?
Yes, and also based on how the media voter service center was pretty busy ahead of the May primary. There were a lot of people who came in person here, and some of whom said, I wish I could have used the site in Upper Darby or Chester like I did last fall.
Thank you. Then I have no further comment.
So, did we make the motion?
Yes, I would like to move to adopt the recommendation by Mr. Allen related to the voter service centers.
Now, second. Is there any public comment before we vote? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So that motion carries as well.
Thank you. It's a packed agenda. This is what happens when we don't meet over the summer months, right? Delaware County needs to follow a national norm in terms of providing more voting booths and fewer scanners to ensure smoother traffic flow in the polling places on Election Day, and fewer problems with equipment setup for our poll workers. So the two biggest factors in voter traffic flow in a precinct are voter check-in and ballot issuance, and secondly, providing enough locations in the polling place where people can mark their ballot so they're not standing there waiting for an open position. We currently have a 4-station booth that includes an accessible feature with a lowered, on one of the 4 stations. It's set up like, crisscross, and there are 4 voting stations where people can vote. I've talked with the county about also purchasing these suitcase duo booths, which are 2 voting stations that would go to each of our 428 precincts. The county executive has agreed to recommend the use of funding under the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARP Act, and this purchase will ideally help us more so at the 2022 elections when turnouts are expected to be higher, especially in in-person voting. So this will also position the county longer term, beyond 2022, to be able to start going after structural changes in precinct reductions. Right now, we have several micro precincts that don't make a lot of sense and increase our costs substantially. We cannot and are not going to pursue any precinct reductions prior to the November 2022 election under state law. But longer term, the county council and the political parties have all expressed an interest in reducing the rather significant number of precincts that we have in Delaware County. It's right now at 428. I don't know the magic number yet, but after the census data come out and the new districts are drawn for everything from Congress to magistrates, I imagine that we could make a significant reduction in that number.
So a couple of things, just on precinct reduction, I don't want to panic people.
No, we're not going to reduce any precincts.
These issues have been out there. We had a plan that was all but finalized before COVID, with everyone's agreement to reduce the city of Chester by maybe half a dozen precincts. I forget how many now, 4, some number like that. So this is not going to be all your precincts are going away, but there are certainly some communities where, due to population shift over time, it's acknowledged by pretty much everyone who looks at it that there's too many precincts. So to the issue at hand here, the purchase of these dual or facing voting booths. I actually really very much like this idea of these facing marking stations. I know there's been persons have mentioned to me that the ones that we have, which are used from all 4 sides, sometimes if you have a smaller room or smaller facility, they don't fit well. These, you can put them against a wall, so you have people back to back against the wall, and I think they'll work out somewhere better in tighter spaces, and they'll also allow us to have, in some precincts where we only have 4 places to mark your ballot, and we have a long ballot like we did in the last primary, it would be terrific to have more stations. So I think this is an excellent idea, particularly if we're using the federal funds to pay for them. So, Ashley?
No, I think, so just to be clear, that this will not be a recommendation that county council has to expend new money other than money that's covered by federal funds. I just want to be clear on that, because it doesn't, the one thing I was going to ask you was, about how many and about what is the cost, just for transparency.
Yes, this would be covered under federal funding under the ARPA, and and part of one of the goals of the American Rescue Plan Act, is to foster any systems that are going to lead to more sustainable programs. And I would definitely think that buying more voting booths and being able to make our elections more sustainable, not only next year but years down the road, is an important task. So I think this is a nominal amount. We're talking for 428 precincts. This is going to be in the neighborhood of $90,000. It's worth the expense, because if we can prevent lines from happening in precincts, especially next year, that's going to be very important.
Yeah. Well, like you just indicated and Mr. Chairman indicated, I do appreciate the long-term thinking on this. I think it will be helpful to the county, so I'm supportive.
All right, so a motion?
I move to adopt the recommendation of Mr. Allen related to the acquisition of more voting booths.
Second, is there any public comment on this? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. All right, Mr. Allen, we are moving along, but I have a feeling we may spend a few minutes on the next item, the reorganization plan.
So when I was approached about taking this job, and as I came aboard, one of the key items that was mentioned to me on a regular basis was the possibility of reviewing the systems and staffing and structure of Delaware County elections with the goal of having a reorganization that made more sense and made elections a little bit more effective and manageable. So under separate cover, I've provided to the board members a reorganization plan where we don't have the three traditional. We have two of them still largely intact: voter registration and voting machine warehouse. But we found that the Bureau of Elections just had, it was like a catch-all. It just had just an unbelievable number of assignments and tasks to do. I'm reminded of those old acts from the 1960s and 70s where one person had to keep 8 plates spinning at once on different pins. So everything from campaign finance to candidate filing to vote by mail to the voter service centers, the training of election judges. Prior to arriving here, I've never seen any one division attempt to manage all those different activities. So the reorganization plan looks at a couple of things. One, we would keep the primary functions of the Bureau the same. And those involve all the organizations around the ballot and the balloting systems. So vote by mail applications, vote by mail processing, ballot design, candidate filing, those would still be concentrated under the Bureau. Broken out from there would be a campaign finance division, which really is a whole separate section of the election code, and that seems to be able to operate autonomously without the need for that manager to be overseeing that, and report more directly to the Director of Elections and in turn the board. Those are some of the key changes in there, but additionally, we broke out election judge, poll worker training, recruitment, and payroll, because that is something that seems like it only is part of the year, but actually there are ongoing communications with poll workers throughout the year. Payroll, we're trying to simplify that, and having the Bureau both handle vote-by-mail ballots and provisional ballot processing and a bunch of other activities in the weeks that follow Election Day is incongruous with also preparing the payroll for the judges, which is a massive undertaking. So that is one other area that I wanted to break out into a separate division. Next, I wanted to expand the role of the voting machine warehouse supervisor to include continuity of operations. And continuity of operations, put plainly, is contingency planning and contingency planning responsibilities. Our current voting machine warehouse management team has been exemplary in terms of being able to respond to different situations and anticipate problems, and also be able to help us put out fires where need be, including on Election Day with equipment rovers. They're best equipped to be able to work with all the different sister agencies across the county, as well as myself, so that we can have a comprehensive continuity of operations plan, so that no matter what scenario we might face, we've got at least a blueprint on what to do and I believe that Mr. Savage is very capable of handling that role. Then the other items are minor cleanup items, such as correcting the listing of staff members who are currently listed. For example, we have one who is working in the Bureau of Elections and vote by mail, but is still in purchasing. And so those are the general items, and also creating an assistant or deputy director within our structure, and also within our structure having a project administrator who handles all of the tasks related to purchasing, purchase orders, working with budget department, all kinds of basically housekeeping administrative tasks. Currently, we don't have that person designated. We have a little bit of it over here, and a little bit of it over here, and a little bit over in the third area. We don't have one person who's really our key central person who's going to be able to develop routines as far as making all the different schedules dovetail together, and then also work with purchasing and the controller's office on a regular basis. So I don't envision new jobs per se, as much as I believe that there's a potential for career ladders here, and building more of a succession plan across the agency.
Thank you. So the request would be then for a motion to approve or adopt the reorganization plan.
With that approval, then we could work with council. They're waiting, they would want a recommendation from the Board of Elections that we want to adopt such a reorganization plan so that we can have this dovetail, if needed, with any changes in the county code, or more importantly, with the budget moving forward for 2022 and beyond.
Okay, so a motion, and we can talk about it?
Sure. So moved to adopt the recommendation of Mr. Allen related to the reorganization plan.
And I'll second. And you know what, I'll start the discussion. So I've been sitting here for more or less 20 years and seen a tremendous change. You know, when I started, we had the mechanical machines. Then we went to the electronic machines. Then we went to the system that we have now. We had a system where, when I first started, there was the county political parties had finance arms, and some townships, but not even that many townships, had their own registered committee or PAC. Now, seemingly everybody who's running for school board and commissioner in every single town has their own PAC and their own fundraising and creating a ton of work there. We didn't have the issues that we have now with poll workers. You know, the political parties got the poll workers, and you know, people would fight for those jobs because they wanted the money, or they wanted the position as a way to move up through the political chain. Nowadays, it's incredible amount of resources by the Board of Elections is expended to staff the polling places, and the idea of just the scale and size of the operation, the extensive discussion we had today, and all the work that was done to purchase the ballots. When you had the electronic or the mechanical machines, there was none of that. So I've said it at many meetings over the years that it amazes me that Ms. Hagan has for so many years been able to keep those plates spinning, and just so many of those plates. So we reached this point where we do need to expand our operations. And I know there's people that are concerned about costs and so forth, but the world has changed, and it's not the elections that we were running 20 years ago were mechanical machines. We have millions of dollars worth of mail processing equipment now. We have very complicated, sophisticated machines with software and ballot design and all these tasks that have to be done that just weren't done in the past. So the time has come for reorganization. We've had these discussions both with your interim predecessor that sat in your position, that got some of the ball rolling on reorganization. Certainly we've had discussions with you, Mr. Allen, over the last I don't know, I'm going to say, I think it's only been 6 months or so, but it seems like it's been a year and a half that you've been here, but a lot has happened in 6 months.
I'm not sure how to take that.
But, so I know that a lot of work has gone into this, and I think that it incorporates a lot of best practices and a lot of recommendations that other places similar in size to us have structured things, and people's analysis of the situation, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from people. So I, for one, think that this plan is a significant improvement over where we are, and I think it's going to be good. I'm sure there's going to be some changes and adjustments to it as we move forward, the same as we have changes and adjustments to a lot of things. But I think it is a terrific plan, and I'm very enthusiastic that it's going to be successful. So I intend to support it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to your point, just two examples come to mind when you talk about the evolution in elections that we've seen in the last few years. Right now, bipartisan talks over the next big legislative package on election reforms include the probability that they're going to mandate the addition of electronic poll books, which is a great thing. It offers the ability to check in voters more quickly with their PEN.ID or their driver's license, what have you. It offers a little bit more security in making sure that a clerk doesn't accidentally register or log the mother as having voted who has the same name as the daughter or the father or the son, or two people with the same name in the same apartment complex, what have you. Little clerical errors like that can be prevented. At the same time, it complicates everything. It makes for more training for our poll workers. It makes for more work for our warehouse. It makes for more advanced work with the vendor, whoever that vendor may be. And this is something that appears to be coming our way statewide, at least in the latest rendition. The second thing is there are things happening right now that I never would have envisioned when I first got into elections in 2006, such as using intelligent mail barcodes on the vote-by-mail envelopes to be able to provide people real tracking to where exactly their envelope is in the mail stream, down to it's been loaded into a carrier's bag. And soon we're going to be seeing that data available to our voters, if not at this election, at the very next election in the May primary of 2022. And there are just a couple of examples, but it's growing more and more complicated, and I appreciate your support.
This is why we hired you, right? We had an independent independent audit company, Eisner Amper. Do you want to comment before I make my comments, or can I make? Okay, thank you. But I recognize, Mr. Chair, that the gentleman over there would like to speak. We asked Eisner Amper to look at this. They're a well-reputed regional company, and they gave us a look, and they recommended a lot of changes, some of which, I think they were clear that you're absolutely supporting here. First of all, the poll worker issue and whether or not that should be broken out, that whole process associated with poll workers. I think from their review that they thought that something needed to be done there, but I think our experience has shown, and I see several people involved in trying to recruit and staff and work with poll workers and train poll workers in this room. That is just a major operation. So absolutely supportive of that. The financing section, I understand it's a unique sort of position. The idea of an operations administrator, I mean, I don't think it may be well recognized how much, Laureen and Crystal and Jim have to interact with major departments of the county, IS, purchasing. I mean, this whole RFP for the printer, I assume, was a very heavy lift for your team. And involved a lot of maybe over-functioning in moments for people to have to step up and fill that. So it makes sense to me. I do appreciate what you said, which is also looking to say we have great people. And is there development and growth opportunities within the structure for people who've been here, as well as, obviously always trying to find the best candidate for every role. So I appreciate all of that. So just want to make sure I'm clear. the approval to adopt a reorganization plan will then allow you to engage with county council as part of their budget process so that you can understand how that would fit in and what's available. I mean, just help me understand that piece of it, please.
So for any of these positions to be created, first they have to go through the budget, and then after the budget is approved, then we could look to filling these positions and/or go before the county council or the personnel department, the county executive, and discuss the compensation levels for these different positions. Because I believe we have the foundation for one of the best election teams in the United States. I believe that firmly. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're retaining and supporting these staff members with not only these measures, changing the organization, but also education and certification opportunities that exist out there that can help our non-supervisors rise up through the ranks or be prepared to rise up through the ranks.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I think that that makes sense, that you have the opportunity to present as part of the budget process, your reorganization plan, and all the positions here. I didn't say one, and it really is important to me in the work I do, but I want to acknowledge all of the great workers we have. But Mr. Savage, you were right. Mr. Savage had to deal with an unusual amount of contingency planning when it came to particularly the 2020 primary, and showed exemplary service to the county in trying to adjust to a ever-changing situation related to in-person voting. So I do appreciate all the recommendations, and I am inclined to support it.
All right.
Thank you.
And I want to add one other thing, that I'm hopeful that the county listens to us and follows our recommendation on this. I think that there is support for this, and there is a recognition this has to happen. You know, we've had one circumstance where we made a personnel recommendation within the last year, and the county hasn't acted on that. And I've reminded them many, many times how important this is to us, and hopefully they will finally get the message and act on that. But in any event, I do think there is support for this. So, is there public comment?
Actually, my question, the questions I had were answered by your latest comments, and they were going to the idea of how the two of you kind of reviewed the proposal so far, and then what further review it will have with the county board. So they've largely been answered.
Great. And I do think, I should have said when I talked about with my comments is, Mr. Lawrence, Chairman Lawrence already referred to it, but if anybody's had the opportunity to see the wharf and the equipment and the expansions and the ballot sort of processing teams at work, this is a massive operation. It really is, and so important to our constitutional right to vote. So, but thank you.
And sir, I forgot to ask you to identify yourself. It's our policy that the public, their name and.
My name is Tom Reinke, and I live on Brookhaven Road in Wall.
Thank you, sir. Further comment? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Carol Miller, Springfield. Just have
Good afternoon, Mrs. Chairman. Yes, ma'am.
So once this reorganization takes place, maybe each party could receive a list of who is in charge of what. Because right now you call the main numbers, the election bureau that I think rings in Chester. But if you want to talk to someone in media, you have to know their extension, or they try to transfer you and you get cut off. So as a suggestion, it'd be easier for the people like Lorene and Jim and Mr. Allen, that we don't consistently ask them questions if there's a more specific person. So that
Yeah,
would just be a suggestion.
absolutely. I think once we have these positions and we fill them, we will, the same way we, have these, the personnel we have identified, in a very public way on our website. We'll do the same thing with all these positions, so that if you have a finance question, you call the finance person, et cetera. Yes, ma'am.
And Madam Vice Chair, welcome. Thank you for coming today. We talk a lot about cross-training, and I just want to tell you that the excellent team that we have has been cross-training me on the nuances of not only Pennsylvania, but Delco in particular. And I'm very appreciative, and we hope to get there to the point where here in media, you're coming into because we consider elections a foundational, part of our democracy, so that here in media, we can have one counter that says welcome voters, and whatever their issue is, whether it's campaign finance, whether it's voter registration, whether it's picking up credentials for watchers, you know, whatever the situation is, we're going to be able to have some cross-trained people there, and we want that to bleed into the phone lines. We're not there yet, and I apologize, but we're trying to get there, and I appreciate your patience as we work toward that.
Do we have other comment on this before we take action? All right, seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that passes also. Next is the poll worker pay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'm recommending some adjustments to the pay scales for poll workers, and currently, a person who works a half a day as either, as a, let's say, an inspector, a clerk, or machine operator, they get $70 for their service, but then more than double that for their training. So then if you have two people working a half day, you could be spending $400 as opposed to the $200 that you would pay one person working that full day. And I think that's a little bit out of whack. So one of the key proposals is that if you're going to receive training pay, if you only work a half a day, you're only going to receive half of the training pay, if that makes any sense. And also, I'd like to put a little distance, not a lot, because I'm afraid that COVID might inhibit our ability to have in-person training, which I value greatly. I think in-person training is the best opportunity for people to get their hands on the equipment, get the sense for it, ask questions, poke and prod, and kick the tires. And so I don't want to put too much distance between online training and in-person training, but I would like to recommend that if it's online training and they pass the test and they serve on election day, the training is $100, whereas in-person training is a little higher at $130. Again, I don't want to put too much distance in there. You could make the argument that online training is nowhere near as comprehensive as in-person. However, if we run into a situation where we're not able to provide in-person training, let's save that for another day when we seem to be out of the woods, because I don't want to punish the poll workers simply because we don't have enough slots or spaces available for in-person training.
And I've thought about this since we've talked about it a few times, and you know, at first I wasn't 100% on the same page with you, but as I've thought about it, I've begun to see the wisdom of this, and that particularly if you've been a poll worker for the last 2 elections and you've used the machines twice now, you may not need the in-person training as much as persons who have never seen or touched these machines. And I certainly, you know, I like the fact we're offering people $100 to get a refresher, essentially. And, you know, it is important because, as we talked about a little bit before, these machines are a lot more complicated than anything we've ever had. And, you know, you're only using it 2 days a year, and they're 6 months apart, and it's difficult to remember all the intricacies after 6 months. So I do want to encourage everyone to, at a minimum, do the online training to get that refresher course, so that when you come on election day, you can remember how the machinery works. And at the same time, we certainly want anybody who doesn't have experience, or anybody who feels it would be in their interest to have that hands-on training to come in, because it is more significant when you can have feedback and ask questions and so on and so forth. So
the current base pay for judge of election is $150 and would remain $150. The current inspector, clerk, machine operator base pay is and would remain $140. The current pickup fee is $20, and the drop-off fee is $20. They would remain the same. So the only changes we would, you know, make are currently all training qualifies for $130, and now we would make it $130 for in-person, $65 for in-person if they served a half day, and $100 for online refresher for a full day, and $50 if they took online for a half day.
All right, we have a motion to adopt that recommendation,
Yes, a motion to adopt the recommendation, Mr.
Second.
Allen, related to poll worker pay.
and I'll second it. Do we want to have discussion?
No, I think I don't know, Mr. Chairman, we haven't talked about it, but I think I probably had the same initial reaction to you, just questioning it, but we have worked hard to increase the poll worker pay and to increase the training opportunities, and I think that everything that you said, Mr. Allen, does make sense to me, so I am going to support this
All
motion.
right, and I'm going to support it. Is there any public comment on this? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries. Poll workers on the ballot.
This is the last item before we go to some other measures. But Pennsylvania state law clearly states that no candidate for office may serve as a poll worker, but it makes the clear exception for those running for judge of election or inspector. And I'm recommending that Delaware County's Board of Elections stick with this standard to ensure that we have adequate staffing at the polls. We have a couple of instances where, for example, a Democratic candidate for judge of election and a Republican candidate for judge of election served together side by side as either inspectors or in some other capacity. And I disagree strongly with the notion of taking them out for this fall when they've already served well together in the past, just because their name is on the ballot. I also have a philosophical problem with this from the perspective of anybody could be a write-in candidate, and yet we would let them serve, but not somebody who earned a position on the ballot either through their petition or winning the primary.
So I think we're on the same page on this, but I think part of the confusion here is because of the way I've probably not well explained things in the past. So to be clear, the law in Pennsylvania is if you are a member of the local election board, you can be on the ballot and serve as the judge of elections or the inspector. I'm just going to say judge of elections, but obviously this applies to all of them in this election. So if you won 4 years ago and you're the judge of elections, you're the judge of elections. If you went and you got a court appointment and you're the judge of elections, you're the judge of elections even though you're on the ballot. Where the issue comes up is we adopted a policy or a procedure or a practice, whatever you want to call it, a number of years ago that deals with emergency appointments. So under the election law, 5 days before the election, if there's a vacancy in a particular precinct for judge of elections, let's say, Ms. Hagan, as the chief clerk, can make a temporary emergency appointment, and it's for that one election only. She can appoint the judge of elections, and it's actually a very helpful thing to do as opposed to having a curbside election, because you know who the judge of election is 5 days before. That person will show up and pick up the materials. You don't have to have a curbside election at 7 o'clock in the morning, which delays the opening of the poll till sometime after the election is concluded. So it's a terrific procedure. It also gives you an opportunity to make sure that person gets training or some training, or if we know that they don't have training, to get somebody else to go out there that day and help them set up, et cetera, et cetera. So we encourage that. The issue that came up a number of years ago is when you have a contested election for judge of elections and one or both of the candidates in that contested election for judge of elections, there's a vacancy currently. If they both put their name in, then it puts the Board of Elections in the unenviable position of having to choose somebody or deny somebody being appointed. So we've often said if there is a contested election in a precinct where there's a vacancy for judge or any of the other positions, if you're running for that office in a contested election, and we know it's a contested election, don't come to us to ask for appointment, because we don't want to be perceived as choosing somebody who's running in a contested election. Mr. Allen points out that, well, there's the possibility somebody's running a write-in, and they come to us, and we don't know that they're running. So I would like for us to just continue the practice that we have. If we know it's a contested election, if we know there's people on the ballots, if we somehow know there's a write-in going on and it's going to be a contested election, we usually don't know that. But I don't want to put us in the position of having to be a detective and go and find out that, you know, this person's running or not running. Maybe we can ask them, and hopefully people will tell us the truth. But I just think the procedure that we followed the last couple of years of saying if there's two candidates running for the office of judge of elections, for us to appoint one of them to be the judge for the election that they're running against somebody is not perhaps the most transparent or best thing to do. So I want to follow the law, and I 100% agree. If you have that position through election or through court appointment, you are absolutely available to serve. And, you know, I think a large percentage of our local election board, judges, inspectors, et cetera, hold those positions and are running for reelection, and they continue to serve, and there's no issue at all with that. It's just this narrow issue of where there is a vacancy and somebody comes to us, and I'm running against Ashley, and I say, I want to be the judge of elections, and Ashley says she wants to be the judge of elections. How's Ms. Hagan to choose? So that's what we want to avoid.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, if they were candidate for judge of election, could they still serve as a machine operator or a clerk or an inspector?
Yes, because they're a member of, you know, if you, I'm just saying we're not going to temporary emergency appoint somebody to a local board of elections if they're running in the election. So if they're the machine operator and they're running for judge of elections, they could still be the machine operator because they're allowed to do that under the law. That's very straightforward. We're just looking at a very narrow exception about when there's emergency appointments and they're asking the board to use their discretion to appoint somebody. I think it's a bad practice for us to use our discretion to appoint somebody who's running.
In a contested
In a
election.
contested election. If it's uncontested, obviously nobody's going to care. We're practical about that.
Okay.
I mean, this has come up before. I think you have a lot of experience, Mr. Chair, so I don't know if there's any public comment, but I think ultimately the more conservative approach of not being perceived as picking a favorite, especially putting Ms. Hagan or somebody else in that position is uncomfortable for me as well. So I prefer the conservative approach that we've adopted historically, and I think it was adopted when you were on a board that was chaired by someone appointed, you know, recommended by the other party, right? So
Yeah, it was, you know, it was Mr. Belfante's practice as well. And you know, this has been the practice for a long time, and we're giving very clear notice right now. You've still got 8.5, 9 weeks to the election. Go get a court appointment. If you get a court appointment, you could serve. It's just, we're not going to be the one making the choice. Chairwoman Guine, you had a question.
I just have, yeah, Colleen Guiney from Dickinson Avenue, Swafford. I'm just wondering, how often does this actually happen?
Rarely.
Okay. I would just say that the most important thing is that those folks who are eligible to serve be the main message that comes out of this meeting. Because I think a lot of people get confused, and I know that
Yes.
some of the individuals are saying, why should I run if I can't serve? Because then who's going to run the polling place? Maybe I won't run and then get appointed later. So we tried to get people on the ballot the best we could, but I've just never seen anyone fight for being a judge of election in the number of years that I've been trying to help fill these many, many vacant spaces. And I'm very thrilled that the county's taken on responsibility for trying to fill these spots, because I just don't think the parties have enough resources to do it. So thank you for that. I hope this unusual situation doesn't come up, and that we send a clear message to the poll workers that we're very grateful for their support.
I'd like to
and I think
thank you.
Perhaps part of it is my inability to send that clear message, perhaps, has confused people. But you're right, if you are a judge of elections or a clerk or a machine operator and you're running, you can continue to serve. This is only a very inside policy for, affects almost no one. So if you're a judge of elections, you can serve while you're running. There's no issue at all about that.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Do we need a vote on that, or we're just going to follow the law, right? I mean, we don't need a vote to say we're going to follow the law.
I think even though we had an action item, I think I've received clear direction from the board on this.
Okay.
And we don't need an action, we don't need a motion or anything. Just briefly, a few other updates. Laureen Hagan and Crystal Winterbottom and I were able to attend the statewide conference put on by the Department of State with election officials from all the counties. It was very informative. It was probably, there was general agreement among election officials from around the state that it was probably one of the best conferences that we had seen. The bad news is that the redevelopment of the next generation of the SURE system, the voter registration / election management / vote by mail database, is not going to be rolled out in the middle of next year. It's now going to be rolled out in 2023.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's
They've been
disappointing.
promising this forever, and they're not fixing the system they have, and now they're delaying it again.
So, that being said, we're working with them as best as possible, and we want to try to build up, possibly next year, some IT alternatives in terms of what our web services can provide in terms of the most timely information. So there's that.
And we've talked about that before, and I think we should continue to do that. And what
Yeah.
Mr. Allen specifically is talking about, and some of you are probably aware of this, when you make your application for your absentee or mail-in ballot and we get it back, we update the SURE system, and it takes seemingly an extraordinarily long time to tell voters that we have their ballot back, and there's stories, and they're somewhat anecdotal, but, of a week and 10 days. So somebody who mails their ballot back, and we get it, let's say Wednesday before the election, it's logged in, it's done. Monday night, Tuesday morning of Election Day, they're checking the system, and it shows their ballot's not back yet, and then they go vote a provisional, and it's because of the way the state system works. So we've talked about trying to build our own database that'll enable voters to know that we have their ballot because of the system that we have to use for the state, and we do both. I mean, we continue to follow the state law, but we would have this supplemental system to try to help voters and eliminate that confusion in people voting provisionals that get tossed because their mail-in ballot was actually received. Mr. Allen.
Secondly, Mr. Savage has been working with local officials as far as securing enough PPE and other preparations for this election. They're also ahead of schedule in terms of trying to make sure that all the voting equipment is ready. And he's now working on updating and revising, along with our poll worker training staff, the videos so that they reflect the very latest materials that we have in the election cage for each precinct, and make other little upgrades to that and edit out outdated information as well. And with that, I'll let you proceed with the next action item, which is on campaign finance waiver requests. Is Lisa here? So Lisa had tendered to you a list of, do you want to come up to the,
Yeah, why don't you
The
come
microphone?
forward and present, Lisa? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Jackson, Campaign Finance Supervisor.
Good afternoon, Ms. Jackson.
Hi. Yes, so I had submitted several campaign finance waiver requests for review. These are candidates who have applied to run for office that did not follow the following requirements because they either didn't understand it or there was some type of misunderstanding. And most of these are first-time offenders. This is their first time running, and they just don't understand the campaign finance requirements. But just a note, we are trying to make ourselves more transparent in getting information to them. There's information on our website. The political parties are also getting information to them. And if they call, we're also trying to be more forthcoming with information.
So let's review them
Sure.
one at a time.
did you
Are
have
you
the
going to
list?
present them?
Actually, no, I did not.
Okay.
You know what, we'll do it at the next
Why don't we
meeting.
circle back to that one?
We'll table it, we'll do it at the next meeting.
Sure.
If you can, or if you can get the list while we take care of the next item. This might take a while
Sure.
with polling place changes. Mr. Savage?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Savage.
Just real quickly before I get to the polling place changes, just to sort of confirm the complications of the two-page ballot from the equipment standpoint. The hard equipment, for everybody here that's voted in person, when you put the ballot through the scanner, you get that American flag. Thank you for voting. That's going to happen for each page. So it's very possible, we're going to have to make sure that we're careful to incorporate that into our training for poll workers and voters, that when they see that American flag, that they're not done voting. They still have a second page.
Is there a way to program the machine so that if they put in the first page, it says,
It cannot be disabled. The machines were certified that way by the state. So they actually, for it to be, I think the next version, they're going to disable that, but that has to go through the state certification process.
Part of the reason, Mr. Chairman, is that the equipment has to be programmed so that if the voter abandons that second ballot or decides not to vote it, which is bound to happen. I've worked around enough two-card elections that part of our training is going to have to be that the poll workers know what to do with those abandoned pages to make sure that they spoil those if the person has left the polling place. So, it has to ring up each one, and the counter will thus reflect, you could have theoretically 200 voters vote the two-card ballot, and at the end of the day, you could have a number like 340 because 60 of them didn't vote the second card. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. There's a lot of different sort of complications that arise with this stuff, and we're getting through it. So we'll move on to the polling location changes. We have a number of them. Some are bipartisan agreements, and 2 are by petition. I'm assuming you'd like to stay with our normal practice and present them as 2 separate.
yes, sir. All the
Okay.
bipartisan agreement, non-controversial ones we'll do first.
Okay, the first thing I need to do is remove from the agenda, we had a bipartisan agreement to move Upper Darby 7-1 and Upper Darby 7-6, and I had sent that to you as part of the agenda. We have a problem that we ran into there as far as accessibility. I'm confident that I'm working with Councilwoman Phillips, Councilman Tunis, and the church leadership to resolve that, and I'm confident that we're going to be able to, but we're not prepared to present that for your consideration until that's resolved. So I'm going to remove that from the agenda, and hopefully we'll have that for you at the next meeting, whenever we schedule that.
Yes, sir.
The next are a number of bipartisan agreements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 precincts in Darby Township. Darby Township 3-1, there's a bipartisan agreement to move from Darby Township School to the Goodwill Fire Company, 719 West Cook Avenue, Glen Olden. Darby Township 3-2, bipartisan agreement. These are all moving from Darby Township School to Evangelical Assembly of God Church, 725 West Ashland Avenue. Darby Township 4, moved to Darby Township Old Municipal Building, that's at 1063 Cedarwood Road. Darby Township 5-1 and 5-2 to Briarcliff Fire Company, 767 Beach Avenue. I would like to say that these are all returning to their historical or pre-pandemic polling locations, and I'd like to thank the municipal leaders here, Mr. Merlino and Mr. Womack. As you know, this was brought to the board previously through petition, and there was some level of dispute over that, and I would like to thank them for putting in the work to get through that and come to this agreement. Radnor 1-1 and Radnor 2-3, we have bipartisan agreement to move each of those from Wayne Presbyterian Church. Wayne Presbyterian Church has been hosting 3 precincts since the pandemic. They're no longer able to host 3. They're going to host their normal precinct only. So Radnor 1-1 will move from Wayne Presbyterian Church to Wayne Senior Center. That was previously a polling location. And Radnor 2-3 from Wayne Presbyterian Church to Radnor High School, which already hosts another precinct. So that's the group of bipartisan agreements.
All right. Motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second. Is there any public comment on any of these? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So those are approved.
Okay. Next, we have 2 petitions. We'll take Marcus Hook 1 first. This was submitted by Josephine Laird. to move Marcus Hook 1 from Cokesbury United Methodist Church Hall to the Marcus Hook Community Center. It's about half block down the road, much better facility, moving from a private location to a public location. Voting machine department certainly supports this effort.
Is there going to be any public comment on this? Okay, so we'll all those in favor? Let's have a motion, sorry.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We always try to accommodate our former chief clerk, Ms. Laird.
We don't mess with Jidge. Number one rule at the warehouse. Radnor 5-1, we received a petition to move from St. Aloysius Academy, who can no longer host, to the Judith Creed Horizons for Achieving Independence facility. It's JCHAI. Everything's in order. We appreciate St. Aloysius' service to the community for as long as they have, and recommend that change also.
All right. This is on the campus of the former American College. It's the Baroque School now, I assume?
The
Part of the Baroque School facility?
it's the Jewish Academy. Or yeah.
It has a lot of names, but yes. Yeah.
Right.
So they're just right up the street from St. Aloysius, across the street, so this seems fine. Is there any public comment on this one? All right, motion?
So moved?
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that's approved.
That's
Anything
it.
else, Mr. Savage?
Thank you.
Thank you for everything, sir. Mr. Parks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of brief items. Wanted to bring everyone's attention more to the public. I know that the board is aware, and Mr. Allen is aware, and our staff is aware, that there are new open meeting requirements that have gone into effect in the last few days, August 29th, in fact, that deal with the posting of agendas prior to meetings, at least 24 hours. So you will have noted that for this meeting, our agenda was posted a couple of days ago. It was available in person. It is posted on the website, and it's available here today to attendees. And one of the provisions of this new law limits the ability of the board to consider items that are not on the posted agenda. Now, that's not an absolute bar. There are a number of carve-outs to that rule, but it's clear that the legislature was interested in trying to give the public a reasonable degree of notice of substantive items, particularly that would be action items. Another element of the law is to indicate on the agenda what items will be action items, and you'll notice that on our agenda, it indicates that this time around. So that's that item. And the second item relates to a request that came into the Bureau from a candidate to withdraw their candidacy. There's a deadline in the election code for withdrawals by candidates, and this request came in after that deadline. It's my determination under the election code that we do not have the authority to grant the request to withdraw under the code. And I understand that that can create some inconvenience and the perhaps counterintuitive result of having somebody be on the ballot who no longer wants to be on the ballot. The problem is that the deadline, I'm sure, exists to avoid problems like people withdrawing in such a way that would require a reprinting of the ballot, for example, and those types of administrative problems. And keep in mind that these ballots do go out much earlier than the average person assumes to overseas voters and that sort of thing. So we have to be mindful of those considerations, and under these circumstances, I believe the only thing we could do is encourage the candidate who seeking to withdraw to file a petition with the Court of Common Pleas, and certainly the court would have the authority to grant that, and I would see no reason we wouldn't recognize a court order to that effect. It's just that I think the way the code's written, we don't have the authority to do it ourselves.
Having had this come and go many times, you are completely correct, and they should see the Court of Common Pleas, and I would be surprised if there was anything but a quick order from the Court of Common Pleas, and to the extent we can make changes to the ballot because they're not already printed, and et cetera, we'll be happy to do that. And I don't know, Mr. Parks, if you want to give them that suggestion, and the suggested form of order should, we could find an old one, but should acknowledge that, make sure the suggested form of order doesn't direct us to reprint the ballots. In other words, it should say that their name should be removed from the ballot as much as practicable, and no vote should be counted in their behalf. Okay.
Noted, thank you.
So that is that. Before we get to public comment, Ms. Jackson? Yes, ma'am.
And you need a list of names, the petitions?
Yeah, if we could go over the petitions, one at a time,
Okay,
and as to each one, what their excuse is, and
yes.
how many are there?
There are 30.
Yeah, I knew there was a lot. So let's do them all, and we'll stop you if.
Okay,
if we need to
absolutely.
stop you.
Okay, we have, the first one is Leona Roadcloud. She states that she was unaware of the filing requirements, the campaign finance filing requirements.
Okay.
You want me to read what she wrote?
No, that's good enough.
Okay. The second one is Friends of David Kelso, who also says that he was unaware of the filing requirements.
Okay.
We have Vernell Peter Coyle, Koyi, who was also unaware of filing requirements. Carlette Brooks, who was also unaware of filing requirements. Vivian Ford, the same thing, she was unaware of filing requirements. And just so you know, the instructions are on the petitions themselves and are also on our website.
Yeah, it amazes me that, but.
Right. We have Renata Aston, who was unaware of filing requirements. Alicia Simmons, she was also unaware of filing requirements. Sharon Council Harris, who was unaware of filing requirements. Joan Broadfield, who was unaware of the filing requirements. Tracy Shavers, who was unaware of the following requirements. The committee to elect Alicia M. Dewar, she missed the deadline, and she was asking for a waiver of fees based on missing the deadline. Sandra Holcomb, she was unaware of the following requirements. Hafiz Tunis, he had confusion about the following requirements due to the transition at the BOE. He hadn't previously had to file reports, but now he does, and he was not aware of that. We have Francis DeCiccio, who was unaware of the following requirements. Jacqueline Mungawi Jackson, who was unaware of the following requirements. Lori Davenport, who was unaware of the following requirements. Joshua Twerski, who was unaware of the following requirements. Kenneth Hemphill, who was unaware of the following requirements. Stephanie Carmichael, she was unaware of the following requirements. Holly Taylor, who was unaware of the following requirements. Philip Stoops, who was unaware of the following requirements. Tracy Turner, she's asking forgiveness of the late fees that were assessed. She did file her report, it just came in untimely. Deborah Bruner, who was unaware of the following requirements. Lucille Pratt was unaware of the following requirements. Marie Richards was unaware of the following requirements. Nicole Beatty, She filed late. She was not assessed fees at the time, but she's asking for a waiver of her late fees. It was Kamal Udin Budo. He was unaware of the following requirements. Kenneth Washington was also unaware of the following requirements. Kahim Green, he filed a report late, and he's asking for forgiveness of his late fees. Hannah for Haverford was also unaware of the following requirements. And that should be 30.
Okay, and as to all of these individuals or committees, this is a first-time offense?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Well, for those of you who have seen this parade before, we have, for a long time, had a policy that your first offense, we will waive the fees. Oftentimes, for these committees in particular, people get asked to do this and don't realize what they're getting into, and they are personally liable for the fees. The amount of people who come to apply keeps growing, and I'm not exactly sure why. But maybe it's just because of what I observed before, that everybody and their sister now has a committee, whereas before people were less likely to form their own fundraising committees and relied on the parties and the political organizations. But I don't know, if we keep having 30, maybe we need to reconsider being so lenient. People might follow the law more, but in any event, they're here today, and I'll support it if there's a motion.
Yes, I will so move, and it's my understanding, as you said this, Mr. Chairman, but this is a practice, again, under prior leadership recommended by a prior party. It's been a long-standing practice, was my understanding.
Long-standing practice for as long as I can remember, that if you had a clean record and no prior offense and some minimally valid excuse, you could come before us and get leniency on your first offense and have the fee waived. And we've kind of done it this way for a long time, recognizing that the laws can be a little complicated and confusing, particularly to new persons that aren't familiar with them. So we're being we're showing some compassion, but I have to say, 30 people, my patience are starting to wear. In any event.
And I would move that we accept the waiver request for that.
Motion's been made. I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries. And thank you, Ms. Jackson.
All
I'm
right,
sorry to
thank
put
you.
you on the spot. I didn't realize you didn't have the information with you before. But
Thank you.
it's important, I think, that there's a public record made of this so that we don't get questioned later that we secretly waive people's fees, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make sure, that was my oversight, so I'll make sure that we have that list available. You're right, it needs to be read into the record in addition to just being supplied, via email ahead of time.
And it's useful that the minutes reflect each individual name, I think, for when we refer to prior offenses or not in the future.
Yes. And you know what? There's perhaps some value into everyone watching at home. It's a huge crowd, knowing that you don't follow directions well. In any event, the next meeting date, I think, Mr. Allen, you circulated a list of dates for several meetings. I don't know if we have confirmed those dates yet, but
I've received feedback individually from both of the members, so I will get back to you. I want to cross-check
rooms,
the
et
feedback
cetera.
I received from you, because there were some dates that either one of you or one of you might not be available.
Okay.
So, but we'll certainly put that on the web as soon as possible.
yeah, I would think within the next week, we can probably announce all the dates through the certification, for the entire fall.
Yeah, and
It would be
the-
helpful for people to know in advance. And
The goal is to try to certify by the 18th of November, if at all possible, which would be the Friday before Thanksgiving, as opposed to certifying the results at the absolute deadline the following Monday. So,
you don't want to meet on Thanksgiving itself to do it?
what's that?
You don't want to meet on Thanksgiving itself?
No,
Maybe
I
Wednesday
really,
afternoon at 4
I don't
o'clock?
think any candidates have a stomach for that either, so.
Mr. Savage?
Yeah, if we could just keep in mind that the last day for the board to approve polling location moves would be October 13th, so we're probably definitely going to need a meeting on that day.
All right, I don't know exactly which day, but I think Mr. Allen asked us about seemingly every day between now and the election, because he wants to schedule a lot of meetings. He's got a good sense of that already. All right, is there public comment that we haven't gotten to? All right, Ms. Luckhammer, anything else?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, with that, we are adjourned, and thank everyone for their time and their participation today.